Hello everyone. So today we will be discussing a very important topic in financial analysis and reporting subject. We are going to discuss liquidation of companies. If you ask me about liquidation of companies, I would tell you that the theory of this chapter or any problem paper for that matter is very important, because only when you know the theoretical aspect of it, you will be able to sort out or solve the problems of any chapter. But liquidation, when you learn, you will understand the theory is directly related to solving the problem. So let's start today's class. It is a very easy portion. You just have to listen to what is being told theoretically. So meaning of the term liquidation. Like it is mentioned in the PPT, it is a legal term and it refers to the procedure through which the affairs of the company are wound up by law. Liquidation or any procedure which happens in a company is always under the rules and regulations, or it is always bound by the regulations or acts mentioned in law. So liquidation is a procedure through which the company or life of the company comes to an end. It is, if you ask me why it is a creation, it comes to end because of law, I would say, as we know, it is a creation of law. Any company is a creation of law. So it can come to end only when the law mandates, only when legally it is said that you can wind up a company, winding up or liquidation takes place. For this purpose, for the purpose of liquidation, a person called liquidator is appointed. Liquidator is responsible for carrying out the procedures of liquidation. He takes control of the company, he collects the assets, pays the liability and distributes any surplus which is remaining in hand. That is, if there is any cash which is in surplus, that particular amount will be distributed. So the whole process of winding up or liquidation is taken care by the liquidator. So there are just 2-3 points to be clarified from this particular slide. One, what is liquidation? Second, who is a liquidator? I hope it is clear. Moving on to another important topic, process of winding up of a company. So this particular process is taken into consideration. It is in this particular method that any company is wound up. It is not something that it is not up to the wish of the company as to what process to follow. It is clearly mentioned in the law, or in company law, it is clearly mentioned as to what process has to be followed. So the first one, as we discussed earlier, at any point of time when the company, either when the law mandates or when voluntarily when the company goes for liquidation, the first thing what happens is a liquidator is appointed. It is after the appointment of the liquidator, various other factors are taken into consideration or various other steps are taken into action. First one, after the liquidator is appointed, he sells off the assets of the company. So the first step we can say after appointment of a liquidator is he sells off assets of the company. Second one, after the assets are sold, liabilities are paid off. So first, liquidator is appointed. Second, assets are sold. Third, liabilities are paid off. Then what happens is, if there is any deficiency to pay to the creditors, the shareholders are called upon to pay the unpaid amount on their shares. For this particular aspect, the shareholders, when the liquidation is taking place, are called contributories. So hereafter we will be referring to contributories. So when we say that particular term, it should be understood that we are referring to the shareholder. So after the liabilities are paid off, what happens is, if there is any amount, if we do not have sufficient amount to be paid to the creditors, the shareholders who hasn't paid the full amount of shares are called upon, and they make sure, the company makes sure that the amount of unpaid shares are paid, so that that particular amount can be utilized for paying off any deficiency. Next, if there is any surplus after clearing of the liabilities, it may be distributed to the contributories according to their rights under the articles. After all these procedures are followed, that is, first, liquidator is appointed, second, assets are sold off, third, liabilities are paid, fourth, if there is any deficiency to be paid to the creditors, the shareholders pay the amount on their unpaid shares. After that, after all these procedures, if there is any surplus, that particular amount is given or distributed to the contributories according to their rights under the articles. So, here when they say contributories, or in other words shareholders, what they are trying to say is the amount of surplus is distributed to the preference shareholders and then to the equity shareholders. Last, after all these procedures are followed, the registrar of companies removes the name of the particular company from the register of companies. So, that will be the last step. After the assets are sold off, liabilities are paid, deficiencies are paid to creditors, the surplus is distributed to the shareholders. Last, what happens is the name of the company is striked off from the register of companies. Who does this? The registrar of companies does this particular process. So, first we studied what is liquidation. It is a legal term and refers to the procedure through which affairs of the company is wound up by law. For the process for meeting all these procedures, a liquidator is appointed by the company. Then we saw the process of winding up. What is a particular procedure which is followed? First, assets are sold off, liabilities are paid, deficiency is paid to the creditors, surplus is distributed among the shareholders, and the registrar of companies strikes off the name of the company from the register of companies. So, that is about the process of winding up of a company. Next, we have order of payment. We studied in the process of winding up that assets of the company are sold, then we learnt that the liabilities are paid off. Now, what we are going to see is how these liabilities are paid, or in what order the liabilities are paid off. First one, this particular order has to be followed when you solve a particular question also. These are the reasons why I said the theory of this chapter is directly linked to how you solve a problem. So, now what we are going to learn is order of payment. In the process of winding up, the second, or you can, if you are excluding appointment of liquidator as a first step, the second step is paying off the liabilities. So, now what we are going to see is when the liquidator pays off the liabilities, in what order that particular payment is done. First one, expenses of winding up including liquidator's remuneration. As we saw, when the company goes into liquidation or winding up, first a liquidator is appointed. So, the first order of payment is you pay off the expenses relating to the liquidator's remuneration. Second, creditors secured by a floating charge on the assets of the company. Third, preferential creditors are paid off. Fourth, unsecured creditors are paid off. Fifth, if there is any surplus, this particular amount is distributed to the contributories. Like I mentioned earlier, contributories here refer to shareholders. In case of shareholders, first the preference shareholders will be paid. Then if there is any balance, later after paying for the preference shareholders, equity shareholders will be paid. So, this particular order has to be kept in mind. I will repeat once again, expenses of winding up including remuneration of the liquidator, then creditors secured by a floating charge on the assets of the company. An example that I would give is, you can take the example of a bank. When you borrow money from the bank, their security will be some asset of our company. Third, preferential creditors. Preferential creditors, like the name suggests, are given preference over other creditors. Fourth, you have unsecured creditors. Fifth, you have, if there is any surplus, that particular amount will be distributed to the contributories. Here in liquidation, contributories mean shareholders, and in shareholders the first payment will be for preference shareholders. Then you have, if there is any balance, you will pay to the equity shareholders. Next, we studied that expenses of winding up will be paid off, which includes liquidator's remuneration. There are three bases on which the liquidator's remuneration will be calculated. There are 3 points on which these are the 3 points that you have to refer when you do the problems also. It will be clearly mentioned in the question. So, liquidator's remuneration, there are 3 bases on which the calculation is done. First one, it can be given as a commission on assets given as security to the secured creditors. Second, cash and bank balance. Third, unsecured creditors. So, when you make the payment to liquidator, or the remuneration which is due to the liquidator will always be based on these 3 points, either as commission on assets realized or cash and bank balance, unsecured creditors also. Next, another important thing when we say about liquidator's remuneration, what we should understand is when we say it can be calculated as a percentage on unsecured creditors. There are 2 formulas that is used here, because sometimes the amount that is available to make payment will be sufficient. In some cases, amount available will not be sufficient to make the payment. So, in the first case where there is sufficient cash to be paid to the liquidator or unsecured creditor, the formula by which you will get the liquidator's remuneration is amount due to unsecured creditors into percentage of commission divided by 100. Because as you have enough cash, as you have sufficient cash to make payment, how will you calculate liquidator's remuneration? You can enter the full amount, that is the whole amount which is due to unsecured creditors, into percentage of commission, whatever percentage they are mentioning, the whole divided by 100. This is the first scenario wherein you have sufficient cash to be paid. In the second scenario where you do not have sufficient cash, liquidator's remuneration is equal to amount available, how much ever amount you have as balance to be paid to unsecured creditors, into percentage of commission. Percentage of commission will be directly given in the question, divided by 100 plus percentage of commission. So, from this explanation, I want you to understand 2 important points. When we are paying liquidator's remuneration, if it is based on the payment which is, or the amount that is due to the unsecured creditors, how will you calculate liquidator's remuneration? There are 2 methods. First, it's not method, those are circumstances. Depending on the circumstance, you can use or apply the formula. First one, amount is sufficient. Second one, amount is not sufficient. When amount is sufficient, the formula is amount due to unsecured creditors into percentage of commission divided by 100. When amount is not sufficient, the formula or liquidator's remuneration is equal to amount available for unsecured creditors into percentage of commission divided by 100 plus percentage of commission. I think this will be explained better with the help of an example. So, let's go to the first example. Amount due to unsecured creditors. So, the amount which is due to unsecured creditors is 5 lakh. Next one, amount available for unsecured creditors before charging commission on amount paid to unsecured creditors is 2,06,000. Percentage of commission to be paid on amount paid to unsecured creditors, that is a percentage, they are mentioning the percentage of commission is 3%. So, from the question we get 3 important points. First, the total amount which is due to the unsecured creditors, that is 5 lakh. Second one, the amount available for how much do we have in hand? Though the amount that should be paid is 5 lakh, after realizing assets and paying off the liabilities, the amount that we have is only 2,06,000. This is a situation where you have to actually pay 5 lakh, but you have only 2,06,000 and the percentage of commission is 3%. So, from this scenario, it is very clear that here the amount of cash is not sufficient. How did you understand that? Because first one, the total amount due is 5 lakh, but you have only 2,06,000 in hand, which means we have to apply the formula of the second scenario. amount available is not sufficient to make payment. So what is the formula that we use there? Liquidator's remuneration is equal to amount unavailable for unsecured creditors into percentage of commission divided by 100 plus percentage of commission. So in this example, we will take amount available. What is the amount available for unsecured creditors? 2,06,000 into percentage of commission. What is the percentage of commission? 3 divided by 100 plus percentage of commission, which is 100 plus 3. So like I have given, how will you calculate liquidator's remuneration for this question? 2,06,000 into 3 divided by 100 plus 3. That will give you a total of 6,000 rupees. So 6,000 is your liquidator's remuneration. Next, a better scenario. This example will give you a little more understanding about what we were discussing so far. Example 2. Let's read the question. A liquidator is entitled to receive a remuneration of 2% on asset realized and 3% on the amount distributed among unsecured creditors. The asset realized 70 lakh, against which payment was made as follows. Liquidation expenses given, preferential creditors amount is given, secured creditors is given, unsecured creditors is given. The question is, calculate total remuneration to be paid to the liquidator. So here from the question we get a lot of information to solve the problem. First one, percentage. In what percentage the remuneration is calculated? 2% on asset realized and 3% on the amount which is distributed to unsecured creditors. Then what they have mentioned is the amount of asset realized. Remember, that is the first step that we have to follow. Asset realized is 70 lakh. Then we have the various amounts to be paid. Liquidation expense 50,000, preferential creditors 1,50,000, secured creditors 40 lakh, unsecured creditors 30 lakh. With all this information, we have to calculate remuneration which is payable to the liquidator. So as you know, before starting any question, first we have to go to the working note. So let's go to the working note. We have calculation of amount available to unsecured creditors. First one, in the steps we had already discussed, the first step is realizing the assets. So the liquidator has realized the asset and there is an amount of 70 lakh. Next, we have to deduct liquidation expenses or expenses of winding up. Liquidation expenses directly given in the question as 50,000. Then we have preferential creditors. The amount which is due to preferential creditors is 1,50,000. Then when you go as per order, you have secured creditors. Then you have percentage on commission on asset realized and 3% on preferential creditors. So asset realized 2% will get a total of 1,40,000. 3% commission on amount paid to preferential creditors, you have an amount of 4,500. So the total of that is 43,44,500. Last, after we do all this calculation, we will get the total amount which is available to meet or to pay the expenses of liquidation. The total amount available which we can pay to the unsecured creditors is 26,55,500. So once we have completed the calculation or once we have gone through the working note, you can draw the format and let's go to the main part of the question. First, you have liquidator's commission on asset realized. We did in the working note as 70 lakh into 2%. 70 lakh is the total of asset realized and percentage of commission 2%. Then we have liquidator's commission on amount paid to preferential creditors. So amount which is due to preferential creditors is 1,50,000. The percentage they have mentioned in the question is 3%. So you got a total of 4,500. Then you have liquidator's commission on amount distributed among unsecured creditors. That is what we saw in the working note. We had calculated the amount which we have, which is sufficient in our hands or insufficient. Just to check whether we have sufficient cash or not, we got an amount of 26,55,500. So we got liquidator's commission on amount distributed among unsecured creditors. the amount available for unsecured creditors into 3%, that is 77,345. We calculated all these amounts and we got total liquidators remuneration as 2,21,845. So I hope this example was giving you a little more idea as to how you have to calculate liquidators remuneration. To sum up, students, I would like to say liquidation, the points that you have to keep in mind: what is liquidation, who is a liquidator, process of winding up, and the order of payment that is followed. Next, calculation of liquidators remuneration. There are 3 bases on which it is calculated, and in the third situation we have 2 different scenarios. One, when amount available is sufficient. Second one, the amount available is not sufficient. So with this point, I would like to conclude the class. We will continue later. Thank you.